And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me is, of course, my co-host Laraib, as we are super excited to break down championship weekend. This is a live reaction following. We just finished watching the Chiefs-Bengals game. We have our Super Bowl matchup set, Laraib, the Chiefs versus the Eagles, which means I have a one-game lead in the picks heading over to next week. This
Well, Lewis,
episode
that makes it honestly that makes it easier for me because you have to pick somebody, but I'm fine with picking either one of these teams. So you're taking the pressure off me, and it's all on you to make that correct pick.
I already know who I'm picking.
Well, let me hear it.
I can't tell you yet.
Well,
Hey, come on. We got a long time for me to make this pick, all right?
Mhm.
But I'm gonna write it down right here. Just did it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's hop in to our analysis reaction of what just happened. We're gonna go straight into the best game. We might do a podcast tomorrow talking more about in-depth into these games, especially the Eagles 49ers game. But this episode primarily will be focused on the Chiefs Bengals, Larab. My first question to you is, did the best team win?
Yes, I mean, even Patrick Mahomes, without all his weapons, you saw so many players go in and out, but he was able to get it done. And like I said, we both picked the Bengals to win this game, but I mentioned, if there's going to be somebody or one group in this game is going to be the difference, it's going to be that defensive line. And they were all over Joe Burrow in this one. Chris Jones and Frank Clark masterclass, and they were the difference in this game, Lewis. And, the Bengals, of course, they were, mostly healthy. Some calls went here and there. But for the Chiefs, with a lot of guys out on the offensive side of the ball to get it done, I think, they definitely deserve the win. It was a little questionable at the end when the guy just has a boneheaded play to get the roughing the passer. It could have gone to overtime, and who knows who would have won there. But in this scenario, Lewis, I think Patrick Mahomes clearly was the best player on the field, and they went out there and they won the game.
Yeah, there were times in the fourth quarter where I'd look up and the Chiefs had the ball on all, or the Bengals had the ball on offense. I'm like, man, they need to get a lot going here to get back in this game. And they were tied. Like the whole game just felt like the Chiefs had it in their whole possession. And it just felt like if the Bengals won, they would have stole that one. And obviously, Arrowhead Stadium, not Burrowhead. Those fans showed up. It was just a raucous environment. That Chiefs defense showed up, sacking Joe Burrow. I don't even know how many times, but it felt like every play he had pressure in his face. They could not run the ball whatsoever. And just credit to this Chiefs team. Steve Spagnuolo had a really great game plan for dealing with this Bengals offense, just blitzing heavy, getting in Joe Burrow's face, making him make quick decisions, and, really taking away the big play. Now, Joe Burrow hit the big play when he needed to, except for late in the game where he had that awful intentional grounding penalty that really screwed them. And like you mentioned, the Joseph Osai penalty late. I think the Bengals defense actually played pretty well outside of a few scoring drives. And then there was that awful Mahomes fumble in the third quarter that really kind of flipped the momentum on its side. Bengals immediately got a touchdown after that. So it was just a really, it was a fun game. But I think, and you agree, that the Chiefs were the better team. It just felt like that the entire game. They're the more physical team. And even with Mahomes injured, and it did show on that last scramble, I mean, how magical was that? I know, everyone loves to praise Mahomes, but I mean, he deserves it. He deserves every single praise he gets. He was down 3 wide receivers in that game. Juju goes out. Kadarius Toney goes out. Who else? There was another receiver.
Mecole Hardman.
Mecole Hardman goes out in the game. So it's just Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Travis Kelce. And then Pacheco had a huge, bunch of catches in that game, including a huge, just making people miss, fighting through tacklers. It was just an awesome performance by the Chiefs offense. Andy Reid, huge credit to him for really getting Pacheco involved because he seemed like he was probably the best playmaker for this Chiefs team. But, I mean, let's flip this over real quick, Laraib, to the Bengals side of things. We both picked him in this game. We thought Mahomes' injury would play a bigger factor, but we also thought this Bengals roster was just more talented. Do you still feel that way? Or maybe if this game was played in Cincinnati, it would be different. I just think both these teams are pretty equal on both sides of the ball. They both have huge playmakers on defense, suspect secondaries, and, big receiving threats. But ultimately, and I hate to say this as an LSU fan, you have to give the edge to the Chiefs because of, and this is all respect to Joe Burrow, by the way, because of how much better Mahomes is than Burrow. I think that's what it comes down to. Now give give Burrow a slide because that offensive line he had out there was awful. And Mahomes has one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. But there is definitely a gap. Mahomes is 1, Burrow is 2. And the gap between Mahomes and Burrow is the gap between Burrow and Derek Carr. I think it's that big.
Yeah, if this game is played in Cincinnati, Lewis, it's difficult to say who would have won this game. Like you mentioned earlier, the crowd noise in this one, just from the get-go, they were talking about it on the broadcast. Even the first play, they're trying to get in the huddle and call the play is just roaring loud in that stadium. And also just the injuries. Now, a lot of people are going to look back at this game and say Joe Burrow's offensive line was missing a lot of key players, but injuries is just part of the game, Lewis. In any type of sport, any type of situation, you're going to have guys banged up. That's just how it works in sports. You're going to have guys missing, and you just have to overcome that. And so, for Joe Burrow, it sucks for the Cincinnati team. Obviously, they also had some really bad calls in this game, Lewis, in my opinion. that one play where it's third down and then the Chiefs are short, and then they replay that third down once again because of clock management. That was just, really, really suspect. I really, we're gonna have to hear something about that from the NFL because what was your thoughts on that?
If you're the referees on that play, the play happened. Honestly, you look around, see, hope no one noticed you blew the whistle, and just be like, all right, you know what? Play goes on, ball don't lie. Let's move it forward. But if anything, it hurt the Chiefs more because they ended up converting off of a Eli Apple hold, but then they took a sack on that next drive and kind of pushed them back to the same spot where they punted. So in reality, it didn't do much. Maybe the Bengals would have had more time at the end of the game. So that's why it wasn't as consequential. If that drive led to a score, it would have been so much bigger. So we need to make it a big deal because the refs in that situation need to either blow the play dead immediately. And yeah, you can say the crowd has a part to play. It was just so loud, no one could hear anything. But it was really shaky officiating crew pretty much the whole game, I feel like. And you juxtapose that to what we saw earlier in the day with the Eagles-Niners, and just flags everywhere. They were on their game, maybe to a bit too much on their game. But at least I would rather, and I don't know if you agree with me, I feel like you should. I would rather a bunch of ticky-tack penalties get called in a game than missed calls. Because if a game goes on more, if there's ticky-tack holds, which is like, technically it's a hold, but come on, give me a break. I'd rather that than a missed call. Now, you can say maybe it's from PTSD, but that's from my experience.
Well, ticky-tacky calls or letting it play on. I'm going to go the other way, Lewis. I think, if it's egregious, we see a lot of egregious calls like, yours. But sometimes you just gotta let them play ball, Lewis. Of course,
I am biased.
If you look at any play, if you just look at strictly offensive line, defensive line, every play, in my opinion, I think you could find a holding on almost every single, snap. And so I think letting them play and then having to go back and review it, I know it slows down the game, Lewis. They gotta look at the camera. It slows everything down. They gotta play more commercials and everything. But sometimes just letting them play on, letting the momentum go on, Lewis, and letting the better team win. Sometimes maybe it just has to go. But there's nothing that we can do about it. There's not much the NFL can do about it. Sometimes that's just how it goes. But getting back to the game a little bit, Lewis, for this Bengals team moving forward, I'm not sure. We'll look at the roster, how many guys are leaving, how many guys are free agents and stuff like that. But for this, they still have a great young group of guys, Lewis, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase still on rookie deals. And so, this is still the juggernaut, one of the juggernauts in the AFC. I don't know if you feel like they're better than the Bills at this moment because, they thrashed them over there in Buffalo, Lewis, but maybe, the next time they play a little bit of adjustments here and there. But, I think these two are the top two teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that they aren't, and that's still not, they're going to be the upper echelon because you still have Joe Burrow on a rookie contract, like you mentioned, Jamar Chase on a rookie contract. Now, that bill will come due. Don't get that twisted, but they need to have a big offseason. And obviously, the injuries to the offensive line really hurt this team. And that's why, in these big moments, you need depth. You need offensive line depth. And it's not like they had, just net whatever, like just zeros. They had negatives on the offensive line, guys who were actively bad. You just need to have decent guys who can at least affect the running game. But then again, speaking about the game for a bit, I mean, we saw in the Bills game when the Bengals were able to run the ball, we didn't even talk about the pass rush at all. Not because the Bills don't have a good pass rush. Yeah, Von Miller's out, but they still have guys. It's just because they couldn't tee off on the passer like the Chiefs could tonight. So I just think that needs to be a huge focus of them, upgrading the running game. Maybe, on defensive end, it's just tough because they have a lot of guys, but they don't have superstars. I feel like they need a superstar on the defensive side. I don't know who's available. I don't know who's out there, but every offseason, the guy you don't expect to get traded ends up on a new team. I don't know what that's going to be. It might be an in-season thing next year, judging on how their season's going. But I just think the Bengals are there. They may miss the Super Bowl, or they lost Super Bowl last year. They lost the AFC Championship this year. Now, let's not take steps down, which it looks like we're doing right now. Let's not lose in the divisional round. But I mean, the AFC is getting better, Laraib. To say that these two teams will be there next year, I mean, right now they look like the two best teams, obviously. Like we said, that four best teams in the entire NFL were playing this weekend. I still stand by that. However, you look at some of these uprising teams in the AFC, like the Jaguars, the Chargers are still hanging around. The Bills are still there. The Ravens, if they get Lamar back and he plays for a full season, they're going to be dangerous as well. So you can't just rest on your laurels and say, all right, we'll definitely be back here next year, and let's just hope it's in Cincinnati. And honestly, that might be the biggest thing. You need to get home field. And I know it's a lot tougher to do in the AFC North, but you need to hope those, knuckleheads in the AFC West start figuring their stuff out and they can give the Mahomes a tougher challenge, because right now it's, 5 straight years in Arrowhead for this championship game. And honestly, that's been the difference in all these Super Bowls. You can't go into Arrowhead every single year and win. You can't call it Burrowhead. With those fans, with that stadium, that electricity, it's impossible. So that needs to be the goal for the Bengals. Really get that superstar echelon talent. I'm not saying sell out for a Super Bowl, but these windows, Joe Burrow says it's his whole career, and that might be true, but there's going to be a dry spell. There's going to be a dry spell where you lose a coordinator, you lose some defensive pieces, guys want to get paid more, a T. Higgins leaves, things like that, where you need to, have a bunch of good drafts, things like that. So we'll see what happens. I'm really excited for next season, but I don't even want to think about next season, Laraib, because the Super Bowl is in 2 weeks. And let's go quickly to that first game. Did you want to say anything else on this game in particular?
No, not about this game. And let's move on to the 49ers and Eagles game. Lewis, you correctly predicted that the Eagles would win this one, but
And boy, did
unfortunately,
they.
Brock Purdy goes out early. And like I mentioned earlier, injuries are just part of the game and teams have to readjust. And the 49ers just weren't able to do that. And, with their backup quarterback in, they weren't able to throw the ball well at all. When Brock Purdy went back in, it looked like he was, they only just put him in just to hand off the ball because their backup quarterback got a concussion, which was, you just gotta live with it. It's really tough for the 49ers team, Lewis. Back-to-back NFC Championship losses. And they got clearly outmatched in this one, Lewis, even on the other side of the ball. The Eagles got short fields on offense, but still they're able to convert. It looked like the 49ers just did not show up today. Nick Bosa was also battling a little bit of an injury. And so they just got put out of their misery in that one, Lewis.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was pretty sad to watch. And to say that Kyle Shanahan can win with anyone at quarterback, maybe that's not so much the case. It didn't look like Christian McCaffrey was very well polished as a pocket passer in this game. And that's the thing about the NFL is the teams that make it this far, yeah, they have the great talent, but they have the depth throughout their roster. And we saw with the Chiefs tonight, guys like Sky Moore on that punt return making a huge, field switching, change of the field position that really helped the Chiefs get into field goal range at the end of that game. Guys like that stepping up for this team. And the Eagles, you see their depth throughout their entire roster. They lose guys, they lose safeties, they lose linebackers. But as long as their main guys are there and they have this great depth on their team, the Eagles just rotating defensive linemen, and, credit to them because they did a great job. And it's really hard to analyze this game. You're right, because Purdy goes down, Josh Johnson comes in, really does not play that well. Then he goes down. The 49ers defense actually, I thought, played very well throughout the majority of this game. But then, they just kept going back on the field because their offense wasn't giving him anything. So at some point, they just they really couldn't hang on anymore, and there was a blowout. So it's really hard to assess this game. I picked the Eagles just because I wasn't very convinced about the 49ers red zone offense. I didn't trust Brock Purdy in the spot in Philadelphia. And I just thought, this Philly offense was better than any, offense the 49ers have faced. And the offense did play well, but I didn't think they played that well. I mean, obviously, it's the best defense in the NFL outside the Ravens, in my opinion. But, I think it's gonna be a great Super Bowl. Obviously, like we talked about in our last episode, any of those four teams could have been the Super Bowl, and it's going to be a great Super Bowl. I personally, this was on my last ranking of which game I wanted to watch, just because there's not really much there. You can say it's the Andy Reid revenge game. You could say it's the Kelsey brothers going at it, even though that's a center and a tight end. Who gives a? But like, it's going to be a fun game. Tons of talent on the outside. There's going to be some huge, matchups here and there that we're going to be excited to talk about. But anything else you have for this weekend in general, Laraib?
No, just a great weekend of football. Like you said, of course, it came down to these top four teams. We both agree they all should have been there. Injuries played a big role, Lewis. Penalties played a big role. We've seen penalties not even in the NFL, Lewis, also in the NBA, just affecting everything. So, we'll see how this officiating for all sports goes, moving forward. But I think that will wrap it up for this instant reaction of the First and Goal podcast from the championship round, Lewis. Big thing, the Pro Bowl is next week, and then of course we have the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. So, but instead of talking about the Pro Bowl, which I know all you guys are invested in, we're gonna start having some special guests come on and talk about maybe their reactions to this NFL season, how they thought about their favorite teams, how they thought about their favorite plays, maybe their thoughts on their officiating, and of course who they think is going to win the Super Bowl, Lewis. And so, a big couple of days stretch coming forward for the First and Goal podcast. We're going to have a lot of guests on. It's going to be really, really fun to have everybody's takes on all the stuff. And if you want to come on, go ahead and message one of us, leave a comment down below. And, you could be on here with us talking about your reactions and your takes on NFL football. Lewis, anything you want to say before we head off?
No, I mean, hey, we're just really excited. I don't know if we probably not going to film tomorrow. We feel like we captured enough in this episode. So we will be filming throughout the week. We'll let you know whenever we do plan on it. And like Laraib said, if you want to join, our doors are open. Just message us on any of our platforms and we will get something arranged. But Laraib, that'll do it for today's episode. This is the First and Goal podcast signing out.
Peace.